Hi, my name's Karen Inglis. I'm children's author at the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I'm here to talk to you today about completing your tax interview forms on Amazon. This is very much a beginner's guide, so aimed at you if you are about to self-publish or you're very early on self-publishing and you haven't yet sorted out your US tax interview, which is very important to do, and you'll find out why very soon. So let's begin. I thought I'd start just with US withholding tax basics, and the bad news is that if you are a non-US author, in other words, you're not living in the USA, you're based in another country, but you're selling books on Amazon in the US or indeed on other platforms in the US, those sales will be subject to a 30% US withholding tax unless you take action. The good news is that in most countries, or many countries, have a tax treaty with the USA, and depending on the nature of that tax treaty, you will either have full exemption from the 30% withholding tax, or you'll get part exemption. And I'm going to come on in the next slide to cover some of the key countries to show you what the sorts of rates are that are in place. Now, in order to prevent the US from withholding 30% tax from your royalties, you're going to have to make a claim for that to happen, and you do that by completing something called a W8BEN form. And with Amazon, happily, that happens online, and it's actually far more straightforward than it once used to be. We're going to look at how you complete that online interview. But also, right at the end, I will also briefly mention the process for doing it for other providers such as iBooks, Smashwords, Draft2Digital, and so on. But the key point here to bear in mind is make this claim, fill the form out as soon as you're ready to publish your first book, because the last thing you want to do is to get your royalties with 30% tax taken off if that's not necessary. Okay, so which countries get exemptions and how much? I've listed here some key countries from the full list, which you can find by going to my blog, selfpublishingadventures.com/tax. And that page will, at the top, take you to links on the IRS website that will give you the tables that these percentages come from. It's a bit convoluted how to get there, so I didn't want to bog down this presentation with that detail. Anyway, these are self-explanatory. A lot of the European countries, but not all, have 0%, which means that you will be able to get no tax taken off. And then what you do is, it doesn't mean you don't pay tax on your royalties, it just means you just pay it in your own country. Likewise, Canada and South Africa. 5%, we've got Spain, Australia, New Zealand. 10%, bad luck, Portugal, Turkey, Israel, Poland, and India. In fact, it's 15%. So what that means is that there are tax treaties between these countries, and so in the case of the ones which are not 0%, it means that at least US will only hold back 5 or 10% or 15%. As I say, though, do go to my website to double check everything, just in case anything has changed, which hopefully it won't have done, and also if your country isn't listed here. Before we go on to look at the actual tax form, the online interview, I just wanted to let you know what you're going to need before you make your claim. Now, most of you will be making claims as sole traders or individuals. In other words, you're self-publishing, possibly alongside doing your day job. You're not running a business as a company. Now, in that case, the tax reference that you're going to need for the interview will be the one you use in your own country. If you're based in the UK, this will be your UTR, your unique taxpayer's reference, which if you do self-assessment, you'll find it on your paperwork. If you're not in self-assessment or you don't have a tax reference, you can use your national insurance number. If you are self-publishing as a company or entity, which in fact I do, you're going to need your corporation tax number or the equivalent from your own country. And, as far as I understand it, also an EIN, which is an employer identification number, which you can get from the US tax office. Now, this is actually relatively simple to get. It involves a phone call. But it does require a little bit of pre-form filling, and I go into the detail for that on my website. I don't want to bog this presentation down with that because I think most people listening today will be operating as sole traders. Okay, so now we're on to the actual tax interview itself. And the pages that we're going to see here are taken from KDP, but it's exactly the same format with CreateSpace if you're also self-publishing in print. So here we are on the initial page, which I found in my dashboard under account. So we have account here. You will have filled in your company, your name and your address, or company address, depending on what format you are. And down here you'll find a section called tax information. Now normally this will have a green box and say, or it'll be asking you rather to fill it in. In my case, I've just recently updated my information, so it's telling me that it's under review. But it'll be obvious what you need to do here. You will click the yellow button and that will take you to the tax dashboard. Again, there's some preliminaries here. You can opt to go paperless if you want to, which I would recommend doing, although you might find that you still get a paper form at the end of the tax year from the IRS. And by the way, when you get that, assuming that there's nothing you do with that, you actually just file it, you have it on file, you don't need to take action with it. But here we go, this is where we take the interview. So we press the button here. And here we are at the first page. So there's just some preliminary what you need here, which we've covered already. And then the first question they ask, are you a US person for tax purposes? And for most people here, the answer here is going to be no. And in fact, I'm assuming that if you're listening today, that you are not living in the US, you're not in any way a US citizen, and therefore that is the main audience for this presentation. Okay, on to the next one. What happens next is you have to say what kind of beneficial owner you are, and this is the box here, and in most cases it's going to be individual. In my case it was corporation, but the next couple of pages I will take the journey as if we are entering as an individual. So again, you put in your permanent address. You will then, if relevant, you'll say whether it's the same as your mailing address or not. The next question, again, you're applying as an individual. It asks you, are you acting as an agent or an intermediary? Answers no. There's then some questions to test whether you are a US person, and clearly in most cases here we're going to leave this blank to do with whether you have a passport, whether you were born in the US, have a green card, and so on. Now obviously if any of those do apply to you, you tick them accordingly. Now the question that comes up next is your royalty income effectively connected with a US trade or business? And this is the question that does confuse a lot of people, because your instinct might be to answer yes, when in fact the answer is no. You only answer yes if you have US employees or you own or control or lease equipment in the US used for your book production. But the answer here will be no. Okay. This next section here, it's just reaffirming the fact that I've told it that I'm based in the United Kingdom, and it's asking me to say that I have reviewed the tests that appear in Article 4 of the treaty and qualify as a resident of the country selected above for income tax purposes. You can go off and check all that if you want to, but assuming that you are safely a taxpayer in your own country, I'll leave that one up to you. Okay, I'm not sure why this is repeated here. I might have got a couple of the screens back to front, so let's ignore this bit here. It comes on now to ask you actually for your tax identification number. And in most cases here, you're going to be answering number 2, the second option here. I have a foreign non-US income tax identification number. I mean, obviously, if you have both or neither, you will need to also enter that. But if you don't have any, I think you probably need to go back and sort out what your tax ID is before you come and do the interview. Okay, so option 2 here, and then we go on to the next screen. Again, this is just telling you what we know already to do with withholding tax and the fact that you now need to provide the tax identification number that you said that you have. So in this case, you'll be entering your national insurance number if you're in the UK, or your unique taxpayer's reference if you have one. Obviously, for other countries, your relevant individual's tax ID. Also here you tick the box to confirm that it is correct and it is used for income tax purposes. I'm just going to add in here a couple of screens before we skip to the last, the point at which you submit, just to tell you what the journey is if you're a company. So at this point you say corporation, and you do get a couple of different screens. You see the other ones, but you also will get this one that asks, do you derive the income for which you're claiming treaty benefits? And if applicable, meet the requirements of treaty provision dealing with limitation on benefits. The short answer here is yes. I've done the research on that, is all I can say, and that's the right answer. Applying as a company or entity, again, this then comes on to where it asks you for your tax ID number from the UK, which here will be, in the case of the UK, this will be your corporation tax number, or in other countries, your relevant country's tax number. And here they will ask you for the EIN. Now, as I said at the beginning, if you go to my blog, you can find out how to get the EIN. And then you would just tick the box here if it's a new one, and so on, and confirm again here. One thing I will say here is I'm really not clear whether you actually do need the EIN, but I cannot get a straight answer from the IRS. Nobody wants to take responsibility for answering whether you could actually just go in with your foreign TIN in the way that individuals can. But I just thought for a quiet life, it's just easier probably to ring up, get your EIN. It doesn't cost anything. They'll give it to you over the phone, and then you're covered on all fronts. Okay, so now we get to the review stage, and this screen is relevant whether you're an individual or a business, the only difference being the form number that will appear up here. This says it's a W8BNE because I am a company. If you're an individual, it will just say W8BEN. However, the most important thing to do when you get to this screen is to check here that your royalty payments will be subject to the correct rate, and in my case it's 0% because we have our treaty gives 0%. So for example, if you're in Australia, this should say 5%. If it's not the correct amount for your country, go back and just double check your entries, because once you submit it, that's the rate of withholding tax that will be applied. I haven't put the whole form on here, but what it will do is it will reconfirm to you back everything that you've entered, and then at the bottom you sign it electronically and submit it. I mean, it does give you the option to print it off and post it in, but clearly I wouldn't recommend that. You just want to get it done quickly online. The other reason I wanted to just draw attention to the name of the form is that when you are publishing with other providers, they may be asking you to complete this form on paper and to either post it or email it to them. So just to be aware that it is actually this same form, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So that really is the short and sweet way to complete your tax interview on Amazon. And as I say, it's the same for CreateSpace. And if you are doing both print and ebook, you will need to do the interview on both sites. Processing may take a couple of weeks. I can't quite remember how long it takes. And in the meantime, the status on your dashboard will show as it is here, that it's under review. Once it's been accepted, I think there's a yellow tick box here, and it confirms what date the interview was carried out, and they will ask you to redo the interview, I believe, every 3 years. So just quickly, what about using other providers? Well, iBooks, they ask you to complete their online declaration, which is short and sweet, and I'll show you that on the next page. With Smashwords, at the time of my putting this presentation together, they are asking you to download and complete a paper form and then send it by snail mail. However, I have contacted them and they've told me that there is an online form coming very soon, and so it may well be that by the time you're looking at this presentation that's available. Certainly ask about it and ask about, if it's not available yet, can you scan and email them the form rather than sending it by snail mail. Draft to digital, again, as far as I can see at the moment, you fill out the paper form and then you scan and email it to them. At the moment I'm waiting to hear from Kobo. I'm not sure what the process is there. I've got a feeling you fill something in online if that's relevant, but I would just suggest if you are publishing with Kobo, check with them. And in all of these cases, you will, as before, you will need your country's own tax reference, and if you're a company, your EIN. Coming back to these paper forms, if you've got to print them off and fill them out, I do cover how to complete those paper forms on my website, selfpublishingadventures.com, in case you need that. And just a reminder, again, that's where you can find out how to get your EIN. Right, just here is a screenshot of the iBooks tax declaration, so you've seen it. In my case, I am a corporation type of beneficial owner. I'm pretty sure that the other option there would have said individual. And as you can see, what they do is they just ask you to tick a box declaring that the beneficial owner doesn't have any employees in the US and doesn't own, lease or control any equipment or assets over there. So if you recall from earlier in the presentation, that sort of ties in with one of the questions that you were asked to answer by Amazon. And then you sign it off, and as far as I can remember, it's a while since I did this, but that is how you do your tax declaration on the iBooks store. Okay, just finally before we finish, I wanted to remind you that as well as making sure you don't pay too much tax in the US, do of course remember that wherever you are, you should be able to claim expenses as a self-publishing author, and those expenses can help reduce the tax that you pay. They can reduce they can come off your profits before you're taxed. And by the way, I should actually front load this by saying I'm not an accountant, so if I'm giving you some slightly technically incorrect jargon here, then I don't want you to take it for absolutely correct, but do just check with your own tax office or if you have an accountant. But I just wanted to make you just aware of the sorts of things you're likely to be able to claim. So if you're using a room at home, you've got utility bills, internet charges, then you should be able to apportion some of those to the percentage of time that you're spending on your self-publishing, which might be 10%, 50%, or more. Equally, if you rent office space, that rental expenses, and then we come on to the more obvious ones: any stationery and postage, professional fees, editorial, accountancy, formatting, illustrators, web designers, advertising costs, PR fees, or any associated materials, for example, bookmarks or posters, that kind of thing when you're attending events. All of that you will be able to put down as expenses. Likewise, travel and parking, going to, for example, book events or school events, delivering books to shops. Maybe they take your books on consignment and you have to pay a parking charge to do that. As long as it's not too fiddly, and if it's just round the corner, it's not worth it. But obviously do what's sensible. Equally, travel that you have to undertake to attend courses associated with your self-publishing or research that you're carrying out. Again, check with your tax office or an accountant or a bookkeeper or online. The rules for your country might differ. Courses and the actual cost of attending courses and seminars, a lot of those obviously are online, but others you'll be travelling to. Society memberships, the Alliance of Independent Authors, Society of Authors, any others that you belong to that are relevant to your publishing. And this one I haven't checked with my accountant, but I would have thought it would be right. Research costs, for example, if you're having to buy a book for research which relates to the book that you're writing, I should have thought that would be a reasonable expense, or any entrance costs associated with that research. I don't know, that might be an exhibition that's very niche and relating to the book you're writing, that sort of thing. But again, if in doubt, check. And also costs associated with setting up and listing your books, for example, with Lightning Source or Nielsen. I think Ingram Spark, if you're a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors, you'll have reduced or no costs associated. I can't quite remember, but those sorts of costs would be an expense. Equally, software packages, although I would just check in terms of those whether if it's a regular monthly expense or whether you've bought the whole software package. I'm not sure whether buying it in its entirety could count as a capital item. Again, this is coming back to me saying I'm not an accountant, but this is really food for thought for you to check at your end. And then, so these are the sorts of things. Expenses tend to help reduce your final tax bill because they come off your profit. And then tax allowances are for capital items such as computers, office equipment and so on, which would have to be apportioned according to how much you use. But the effect of that is that in some way, shape or form, which if I'm absolutely honest, I don't quite understand, but they are allowable, and you'll be able to write them off, as they say, over a period of time, which effectively may reduce your tax. So that was just a little aside from a sort of, based on the kinds of thing I do have an accountant, and as you can probably work out, I'm better at writing than I am at figures, but that might give you some food for thought. Final slide here really is, if you're by any chance publishing for children, I have my blog, selfpublishingadventures.com. It isn't just for children's publishers, but you'll find lots of information there. There's also, if you're based in the UK, as well as tax on US royalties, I have a section on paying UK income tax on book royalties for UK authors. So that's a kind of useful one for you to go and have a look at, to do with what your obligations are. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful for if you're just starting out in self-publishing, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Indie Author Fringe. And see you again soon, I'm sure. Bye for now.